What happens when a billionaire's son tries to publicly humiliate a congresswoman who clawed her way into power? He thought it'd be easy. She made him regret it. Live in front of millions. He thought leadership was inherited. She showed him it's earned. Watch what happens when arrogance meets truth and loses. It's not just a debate. It's a reckoning. Before we dive into this unforgettable moment of quiet strength and public reckoning, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Tailbeam. We bring you real, raw, and resonant stories that remind us why some voices never need to shout to be heard. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a black woman from Texas who once juggled 3 jobs to put herself through law school, is about to face off with Barron Trump on live national television. It's not just a debate. It's a pivotal moment wrapped in high production, political tension, and symbolic meaning. Over 4 million people are watching. The setting is a national ethics forum held in a grand auditorium filled with a cross-section of America. Students with notepads and smartphones in the front rows, media pundits and political analysts in the middle, and activists, lawyers, and concerned citizens in the back. The atmosphere crackles with anticipation. People sense something big is about to happen, though they can't quite articulate it. The lights dim, not entirely, but enough to create that electric hush of significance. Cameras hum and lens motors click. The stage banner reads, "The Future of Ethics in American Politics." Sterile words that don't begin to capture the stakes. Jasmine Crockett isn't just stepping into a forum. She's stepping into a legacy-defining moment. Once relegated to late-night C-SPAN hearings and obscure committee meetings, tonight she stands center stage, poised to represent a different kind of power, earned, not inherited. On the other side is Barron Trump. For years he's been largely silent in the public eye. Now, backed by a slick new conservative youth think tank, he's emerging as a political figure. The forum is his debut, a strategic rebranding of the Trump legacy, designed to present him as thoughtful, mature, and ready for leadership. His advisors have one goal: make him look dominant, competent, and in control. Let him walk away from the event as a serious political contender. The contrast between the two couldn't be more stark. Jasmine's strength comes from a lifetime of real-world experiences, grappling with injustice, surviving law school while moonlighting as a hairdresser, and fighting tooth and nail to represent underrepresented voices in the halls of power. Barron's strength is polished image, handlers, talking points, and inherited name recognition. As the moderator, Lyle Hartman, cues the countdown to go live, both participants stand backstage. Jasmine fingers a worn ribbon from her mother's cancer treatment, grounding herself in legacy, love, and purpose. Barron adjusts his tie for the 3rd time, more focused on optics than outcome. Above them, the stage lights blaze to life. 2 podiums stand ready. One sleek and extravagant, edged in gold trim, Barron's, the other plain and unadorned, Jasmine's. It's a subtle but telling visual metaphor, the difference between privilege and perseverance. In this setup, the audience isn't just anticipating a debate. They're watching what promises to be a reckoning, a symbolic clash between 2 Americas. One rooted in generational wealth and political capital, the other in grit, resilience, and earned leadership. What's about to unfold is not merely a conversation. It's a televised moment of confrontation, where the nation is invited to consider, what does real leadership look like? The debate begins with a deceptively calm tone. The moderator, Lyle Hartman, offers a textbook opening. In your view, what does ethical leadership look like in today's America? It's a safe prompt, a chance for each participant to settle in before the real heat begins. But Barron Trump doesn't take the safe route. Instead, with the poise of someone trained to look effortless, he sidesteps the question and launches a personal jab. Looking directly at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, his voice smooth and composed, he delivers a line that seems innocuous until the weight of its implications settles. "I'm fascinated truly by how someone goes from a hair salon chair to the House floor. Congresswoman Crockett, how does that happen?" The air shifts. There's no raised voice, no overt insult, but the message is clear: you don't belong here. It's not a question rooted in curiosity. It's an attack veiled as a compliment. A dig at her background, a challenge to her legitimacy. The auditorium reacts with a collective gasp, subtle but unmistakable. It's the sound of tension being pulled tight like a wire. Even the moderator blinks, caught off guard. Some audience members exchange glances. It's only the first question, and already the gloves are off. But Jasmine Crockett doesn't flinch. She stands perfectly still, hands lightly resting on her podium. Her stillness isn't hesitation, it's control. The pause she takes isn't a stumble, it's a weapon. She lets the silence do what words can't, expose the condescension behind his statement. Then, with razor-sharp calm, she repeats the question, as if to make sure everyone hears the subtext. How does it happen? She doesn't answer him, she answers the room. Her voice is low, even, and deliberate. It happens when a girl works 3 jobs to afford a degree no one thought she could get. It happens when she studies past midnight, wakes up at dawn, and walks into courtrooms where no one expects her to win, but she does. The room leans in. It happens when a woman walks into spaces where people call her emotional or inexperienced, and she outworks every single one of them. She turns her eyes to Barron, not with fury, but with surgical precision. I didn't inherit a platform, Mr. Trump, I earned it. And with that, the dynamic of the stage changes. The audience doesn't erupt, this isn't a rally, but a subtle energy shift flows through the room. Heads nod, spines straighten, a murmur of recognition ripples across the crowd. Something real just happened. Across the stage, Barron Trump's smile falters, just slightly. He retreats into his prepared notes, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. He hides it well, but something about Jasmine's calm, unshaken rebuttal has rattled his footing. We're pulled into a sharply edited flashback, a war room inside a conservative think tank in D.C. Barron is seated at a polished glass conference table, surrounded by advisors, stylists, and media handlers. The atmosphere is buzzing, whiteboards, strategy decks, outfit racks, teleprompters, all working toward crafting an image. His advisors are blunt. They know Jasmine Crockett is a skilled debater with a real story that resonates. They also know they can't out-policy her. You rattle her, one strategist says. Hit her identity. Make it sound like she just got lucky. Blur the line between success and chance. Another adds coldly. Make her look emotional, unstable. If she bites, you win. The comms director hands him a flashcard. On it, in bold letters, hairdresser to house floor. Underlined twice. Lead with that. They tell him. It's surprising. Sounds polite, but it digs under her skin. If she reacts, you win the frame. Barron stares at the card. It feels sharp, slightly cruel, but they say it will work. He tucks it into his suit pocket, back to the stage. Now live. Barron used the card. He struck first, but what his team never anticipated was that Jasmine wouldn't react emotionally. She would elevate the moment. She took the insult meant to undermine her and turned it into a declaration of earned power. She reminded the room that lived experience is not weakness, it's strength. That climbing your way from obscurity into Congress takes more leadership than anyone born into it will ever understand. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend her past. She defined her power. And without anyone realizing it, the center of gravity in the room just shifted. After Jasmine's calm, cutting response to Barron's veiled insult, the atmosphere in the auditorium becomes almost electric. But instead of retreating, Barron Trump doubles down. He mistakes the silence following Jasmine's words for victory. To him, the stillness feels like momentum. His training kicks in. He remembers what his advisors told him. If it lands, keep going. Dominate the moment. So he leans forward at the podium, adjusting his stance into what he's been coached to believe is authoritative. With a smooth tone, Barron pivots from personal jabs to policy. His voice now carries the cadence of a political ad, polished and rehearsed. Look, I respect the Congresswoman's story, he begins, with a practiced smile. But policy isn't about who struggled more. It's about results. Metrics. Outcomes. On the giant screen behind them, graphs begin to flash. Statistics about child poverty, education funding, dropout rates, all from Texas's 30th district, Jasmine Crockett's home turf. The visual aids look impressive, precise, factual. But something's off. Under your watch, dropout rates have increased by 4.6%, Barron says. Meanwhile, your voting record shows an aversion to fiscal discipline. The words are smooth, the delivery is sharp. But his voice has changed. It's no longer firm, it's condescending. The tone of a prosecutor, not a peer. He's not speaking to her, he's speaking around her. To the cameras, to the donors, to the headlines. Then he drops a line that his team had circled in red on the prep sheet, the one meant to frame Jasmine as undeserving. We can't keep mistaking biography for merit. Overcoming hardship doesn't automatically make someone a visionary. He says it like it's profound, but the room feels colder now. No one claps, no one cheers. The words just sit there, dense and uncomfortable. A few audience members shift in their seats. The moderator, Leal Hartman, hesitates as if to interrupt but stops. The cameras are rolling and the nation is watching. Barron continues, unaware or unwilling to admit that the energy has turned. He moves into his final flourish. Leadership is about clarity. It's about knowing when to say no, when to compromise, when to prioritize the nation over your narrative. He delivers the word narrative like it's a weapon, like it's the final blow. He leans back slightly, expecting the room to reward his assertiveness, but nothing comes. There's no applause, no nods, just a quiet discomfort. And through it all, Jasmine doesn't say a word. She stands still, not passive, but resolute. Her silence is not submission, it's preparation. And it's devastating. In the third row, a retired civil rights attorney leans to the person beside him and whispers, he thinks she's going to argue. He doesn't realize she's going to educate. Barron can't feel it yet. But the balance is slipping. His dominance, his rhythm, the whole performance, it's beginning to collapse under its own weight. Because while he's spitting out percentages and pivot points, Jasmine is rooting herself in reality. And the crowd can feel the difference. Her silence is not weakness. It's strategy, it's experience. And the silence that follows Barron's final words isn't the silence of defeat. It's the quiet before impact. Then Jasmine speaks. Her voice is still calm, lower than his, slower. I'm glad you brought up outcomes, Mr. Trump. There's no sarcasm, no venom, just clarity. Last month I visited a middle school in Pleasant Grove. One of the teachers pulled me aside, tears in her eyes, and told me she's using her own paycheck to buy pencils. She pauses, not to be dramatic but to let it land. Not iPads, not fancy tools. Pencils. A subtle shift flows through the crowd. Bodies lean in, phones lower, people listen. Jasmine is no longer responding to an opponent. She's reclaiming the entire conversation. After Barron's calculated takedown, filled with charts, half-truths, and accusations, Jasmine Crockett doesn't defend herself. She tells a story, and she changes the entire tone of the evening. Her voice is low, steady, not loud, not reactive. She speaks like someone who has seen too much to be shaken by spectacle. Last month, I visited a middle school in Pleasant Grove, she begins. A teacher pulled me aside, tears in her eyes, and told me she was buying pencils with her paycheck. Pencils. The word echoes with quiet force. No charts, no slides, just lived reality. The kind of detail that hits harder than any statistic ever could. The audience begins to shift, not because they're bored, but because they're awakening. Jasmine isn't just telling anecdotes, she's naming truths. I spoke to a grandmother in Oak Cliff, she continues, raising 3 grandkids alone after her daughter died of an untreated infection. She pauses. Untreated, because her local clinic shut down after federal budget cuts redirected funding to zip codes that were already overserved. Now the room isn't silent, it's listening. Truly listening. The crowd, filled with students, journalists, educators, and longtime activists, begins to feel something deeper than debate. Jasmine isn't offering soundbites, she's offering stakes. She turns toward Barron, not to attack but to clarify. When you cite statistics, Mr. Trump, I'm not impressed, because I know their names, I know their faces. She doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't need to. The truth is doing the work for her. I see them in grocery store lines, in funeral homes, in overcrowded classrooms, in housing units riddled with mold and neglect. She lets it hang, not for drama, but because some truths are too heavy to rush. You call that emotion? She says softly. I call it representation. A murmur of agreement rises, not from passion but from recognition. People aren't clapping because it's a performance, they're nodding because it's real. Barron, still standing at his gilded podium, blinks. He taps his fingers against its edge, a rhythm that now sounds like nerves. His smile is flickering. The confidence he projected earlier is cracking at the edges. Meanwhile, Jasmine steps forward, not literally, but spiritually. Her presence begins to fill the room. I didn't come here to talk about hardship like it's my campaign logo, she says. I came to talk about solutions. And then she delivers the line that slices through the debate like a scalpel. Because when you legislate from an ivory tower, you miss the mold on the floors below. The room doesn't explode with applause, it settles. That line doesn't need applause, it lands. The moderator, who had been flipping his cue cards in preparation for the next question, pauses. He senses something has shifted. This is no longer a debate, it's a lesson. Jasmine isn't defending herself. She's defining leadership. She adjusts the mic slightly. Her voice stays calm, even, never performative. Before we move on, she says to the moderator, I think I should answer the earlier question. The one that wasn't really about leadership. The room stills again. Even the moderator leans in, surprised, but he doesn't stop her. You asked how someone like me goes from a hair salon to the house floor. She doesn't laugh. She doesn't roll her eyes. She delivers her answer like testimony. 3 jobs, full-time coursework, top of my class. She pauses, not because she's waiting for claps, but because the truth needs space. No trust fund, just receipts. That single word, receipts, drops like a gavel. In the back, a professor quietly whispers, that's it. She continues, not glancing at Barron, because this isn't about him anymore. I didn't get into politics because someone cleared a path, I carved one. And then she lays it all out, not as a list of accomplishments, but as a map for survival. Late nights, rejection letters, bounced rent checks, and a mother who reminded me that showing up is the first revolution. She isn't emotional, she's anchored. She's not asking to be seen. She's reminding people they already see her, because she is them. I bring that up not for pity, but because I represent thousands of people who never see themselves on a stage like this. I've been them. I still am. Meanwhile, Barron is quiet. His smirk has disappeared. He flips through his printed stats, trying to find something, anything, to regain control. But Jasmine isn't just commanding the room, she owns it now. You said policy is about results, she says. I agree. But when you measure results without context, you get numbers that lie. She explains, carefully and clearly, that statistics don't tell the full story of a school with no air conditioning for 5 years. That her so-called obstructive voting record hides the fact that quiet amendments she authored saved jobs and services. Then she turns to him, gently, deliberately. You studied this debate, she says. I've lived it. It's not defiance, it's declaration. And without ever raising her voice, Jasmine Crockett just took the debate away from Barron Trump. She didn't just rebut his argument, she dismantled the frame he tried to trap her in. And now, she's setting the terms. The auditorium is quiet, but not empty. It's full of readiness now. Not for a performance, but for something real. Something earned. Jasmine Crockett has just reframed the entire debate, not by shouting, not by attacking, but by owning her truth with surgical precision. Her tone hasn't changed. She's still composed, steady, focused. But the gravity in the room has shifted toward her like a magnetic field. Meanwhile, Barron Trump is floundering. His polished demeanor is starting to wear thin. He looks at his printed notes like a drowning man looking for a raft that isn't there. What once felt like rhythm, his delivery, his confidence, now feels forced. But he isn't ready to give up control just yet. He flips to a page marked with bold highlights, hoping to claw back credibility with what his team had prepped as a silver bullet. He lifts a document before the crowd like it's Exhibit A in a trial. His voice regains some of its earlier smoothness, but the edges are fraying. You speak passionately, Congresswoman, he says, putting emphasis on the word like it's a soft insult. But passion doesn't erase voting records. The crowd leans back slightly, sensing another pivot to tactic over truth. You voted against House Resolution 214, he says confidently, a bill that would have increased federal education grants in underperforming districts. You stood against opportunity for the very people you claim to represent. He glances toward the audience as if expecting heads to nod, as if waiting for a moment of vindication. It doesn't come. Jasmine's face doesn't change. No eye roll. No smirk, just a calm, confident raise of her hand. Let me stop you right there. The interruption is clean, surgical, not emotional. You're quoting half the bill. Barron hesitates, mid-glance at the audience. I co-sponsored it. The words hang in the air like a trapdoor opening beneath him. Now it's his turn to blink. The amendment you're referencing, Jasmine continues, stepping away from her podium slightly, not for show but to speak directly, was not part of the original resolution. It was tacked on in the 11th hour. She breathes, not to pause but to cut cleanly. It would have stripped funding from rural public schools in my district, schools already under-resourced, just to favor private charter networks with zero accountability. Now it's no longer about him, it's about policy, reality, responsibility. What I voted against wasn't education reform, she says. It was predatory policy dressed up like compassion. And then she does something even more powerful. She proves it. Section 4A, she says, an amendment I drafted, redirected those funds to districts with gaps in mental health services. Behind her, on the large screen, her amendment appears. Receipts, not tweets, not headlines, not talking points. Legislation. The moderator, once ready to intervene, now just watches, pen hovering unmoving. The audience is silent, not out of discomfort now, but awe. Students stop typing. Professors lean forward. Viewers at home, watching live streams and classroom replays, are seeing something they weren't prepared for. A masterclass in policy, presence, and precision. Barron, meanwhile, is unraveling. He flips through the bill, frantically trying to find the section. He sees it. Her amendment. Her name. He wasn't expecting her to know the bill better than him. Jasmine steps back to her podium, not as a retreat, but as a return to home base. Then she does something Barron never expected. She turns away from him altogether and speaks directly to the viewers at home. If you're going to quote legislation, Mr. Trump, quote all of it. Otherwise, it's not a fact, it's a headline. The pause that follows is deafening. And then, finally, applause. Not the kind that explodes on cue, not the orchestrated kind. Real applause. The kind that grows from the bottom of the room and rises upward like a wave. Somewhere miles away, a high school civics teacher pauses the video and whispers to their students, "That is how you debate." Back in the room, the moderator is still frozen. Barron Trump is stiff. He shuffles his papers with a tight jaw and a smile that now looks like a mask slipping. The notes that once felt like weapons now feel like liabilities. He tries again to pivot, flipping through pages as if the right line will jump out and save him. But the audience sees it. He's no longer leading. He's reacting. Jasmine doesn't wait, her voice still calm. She says, "Mr. Trump, I understand your strategy. You came prepared with headlines, cherry-picked data, and a narrative that plays well in sound bites." A few chuckles escape the front row. Not mocking, but knowing. Barron tries to hold his smirk, but it slips. "But here's the thing," she adds, turning to him one last time. "If you came for theatrics," a breath. "I came for truth." Laughter now, not cruel, not loud, but cathartic. A release. The moderator can't hide his smile. The audience no longer sits back, they're leaning forward. Barron Trump isn't debating anymore, he's surviving. And Jasmine Crockett? She's not debating either, she's leading. The room is no longer divided, it's aligned, behind Jasmine Crockett and what she represents. She's dismantled every line of attack, not with fury or theater, but with clarity, control, and lived experience. But Barron Trump doesn't see it. Not fully. Not yet. He's still reaching, grasping at the edge of relevance with the kind of desperation that only someone born into power can display when they realize they're losing it. He tries again. "That's cute, Congresswoman," he says, forcing a smug grin, but people watching aren't interested in emotional appeals. He says it quickly, almost reflexively, like a child throwing the last stone from a hiding place. Jasmine doesn't move. She doesn't even blink. She lets the insult sit. Then she speaks. Not louder, not sharper, but lower. "They're not watching me for emotion," she says softly. "They're watching you, for control." The line lands like a dropped pin in a funeral parlor. Quiet, sharp, final. There's a gasp, faint, involuntary. A few in the crowd exchange glances. The moderator stiffens. Even the production crew behind the scenes stops adjusting cables. Barron doesn't have a response. He blinks, his face faltering in real time. The smugness has evaporated, and all that remains is a young man out of his depth, confused by a world that refuses to reward him just for showing up. The moderator clears his throat, trying to reset the tone. But Jasmine is not finished. Barron had just called her too emotional. He thought that would weaken her, that it would shrink her presence. Instead, it gave her a stage. "Congresswoman, you're clearly very passionate," he'd said. "But let's be honest. There's a difference between leadership and just being loud. Frankly, he added, your tone, your expressions, it's the kind of behavior that makes people uncomfortable. You're too angry, too aggressive, it's not becoming of a public servant. The words dripped with a familiar poison, polite misogyny, racially coded condescension, and Jasmine Crockett cuts through it like a scalpel. She doesn't shout, she doesn't flinch, she speaks with surgical precision. You call me emotional when I'm informed, but you give men like you credit just for showing up. If this moment moved you, subscribe for more stories that speak truth to power. Silence, deafening, complete. The moderator doesn't breathe, the audience doesn't move. Even the cameras pause, as if stunned. Jasmine continues, voice steady but rich with the weight of experience. When I speak with urgency, I'm angry. When I correct a lie, I'm aggressive. But when a young man with zero elected experience reads off a prep sheet, he's confident, he's composed, he's credible. She turns slightly, not for effect, but because she's now speaking to every woman who has ever been told she's too much. This isn't just about me. This is about every woman who's had to lower her voice to be heard. Every woman told to smile more in boardrooms, to soften her tone in courtrooms, to calm down on national television. You could hear a pin drop. She's not giving a rebuttal, she's giving a reckoning. Her voice doesn't rise, it anchors. I've fought for families who couldn't afford a lawyer. I've written legislation while carrying the grief of mothers who buried sons they couldn't save. I don't get to be calm when I'm carrying that, and I shouldn't have to apologize for it. Somewhere near the back, a woman places her hand over her heart. Another closes her eyes. Someone else whispers, yes. This is no longer a debate. This is testimony. Jasmine steps a little closer to the mic, not to raise her voice, but to bring it closer to the truth. You don't get to define what composed looks like. Not when the only storm you've ever weathered is a scheduling conflict. The crowd doesn't erupt, it exhales, because what just happened wasn't political theater. It was a shift in the narrative of American leadership. Barron Trump stands frozen. His team behind the scenes isn't texting, they're staring, because even they know it's over. Every tactic they coached, every jab, every data point, every smile, none of it landed. Jasmine Crockett didn't just resist their strategy. She refused to play their game. And in doing so, she rewrote the rules. The debate ended not with applause, but with awareness. Jasmine Crockett didn't walk off the stage triumphant in the traditional sense. There were no balloons, no chants, no campaign music swelling behind her. She didn't pump her fist or flash a victory smile for the cameras. She simply walked off, the same way she walked in, grounded. But something had changed. Not just in the auditorium, but across the country. People weren't just watching a debate, they were witnessing a shift. In the days that followed, clips of her rebuttals didn't just go viral, they became syllabus material. Her words, quote all of it, I carved a path, you call me emotional when I'm informed, appeared on posters, lecture slides, protest signs. High school debate teams analyzed her tone. College classrooms dissected her rhetorical structure. Women whispered, she said what I couldn't, to themselves in office bathrooms and courtroom elevators. And Barron Trump? He wasn't humiliated, not overtly. But the silence that followed his final words told a story louder than any headline could. His debut as a political force had been intended as a coronation. Instead, it became a lesson on what happens when you mistake privilege for preparation, charisma for character, and rehearsal for readiness. He had come to perform. She came to lead. He had a script. She had receipts. In the end, Jasmine Crockett didn't win because she silenced her opponent. She won because she amplified everyone who has ever been silenced. And in a country starving for authenticity, for leaders who don't just quote policy but live its consequences, that wasn't just powerful. It was revolutionary.